So this Tellervo tutorial is going to take you through the mapping features of the software. So there are two main areas where we can get to the mapping within Tellervo. The first is through the administration menu. So if you go to Administration, Sitemap, that will bring up the main sitemap interface. I'm logged in here into the Cornell database, so you can see here we have map pins for all the main sites within the Cornell system. Just going to turn those off for a moment. So the mapping within Tellervo is made possible using an open source toolkit released by NASA. As you can see, it's got much of the sort of functionality that you'll be familiar with from tools like Google Earth. So on the left hand side here we have our control panel. So at the bottom we can turn on some of the controls. So for instance we have a world map, a scale bar, and a compass. And we also have a list of the background layers that are configured with Tellervo. So the main one you see right now is called Blue Marble. That comes downloaded with Tellervo. These other layers here are automatically downloaded remotely over the net. So for those of you that are working within the United States, we're lucky enough to have access to USGS maps. So if we turn those on, I'm going to zoom in now into Ithaca, where I am now. So as you might imagine, organisations like the USGS aren't quite as well funded as people like Google, so you may find that the first time you zoom into sites that these tiles are quite slow to load. Luckily within Tellervo we have a mechanism for caching the information, so once you have visited a site for the first time, that map data is then stored locally on your hard disk, so you should then find the next time you go to the same site that these map tiles are immediately available for you. So like Google Earth, we can pan around by clicking and dragging on the map. We can also, if you hold down the Shift key and click and drag with your mouse, you can tilt the map and spin the map. You can also zoom in and out using the wheel. If you have a wheel on your mouse, you can use that to zoom in and out. Or alternatively, we can use the buttons on the screen here. These all have the same functionality, so whichever you're most comfortable with. So another of the features which is quite useful is the ability to exaggerate the topography of an area. So if we use this button here, you'll see we can stretch the landscape, which can be quite useful if you're trying to get a feel for your site. So other background data that's available to us. So if you're particularly if you're working outside the US, one particular layer which is particularly useful is the Microsoft Virtual Earth layer. So you'll see we have pretty good quality aerial imagery for much of the world. So if we zoom out, so as well as these sort of these map layers, we also have some standard things. So we have place names, as you see on the map. We can also have the basic political boundaries as well, which can be useful to you. And so as well as these sort of basic pre-configured map layers, we can also bring in other remote data from something called Web Map Services, WMS. So this is a sort of a standardized protocol for serving up geographic data over the internet. So there are many organizations that provide their data through this system. So if you go to the View menu and do Layers, Add Remote Layers, This will bring up the map servers that you've got configured. So Tellervo comes with two basic layers, two basic servers pre-configured, both from NASA. But if you have other data providers that you want to add, you can do that here using the Add button. And for the systems administrators, so people that are running the Tellervo server, you can there are instructions within the documentation for showing how to make this available to all your users. So if you have, for instance, a lab database containing map data for your particular region, you can make that available through the Tellervo server, and this will appear as an extra tab here for all your users to use. So it's a good way of disseminating your map data. So that's the sort of basic outline of the sort of background maps. Of course, what we want to use this map for are for showing our data. So if I turn back on here, we have the as I said before, the sites from the Cornell database. So the beauty of having this mapping system tightly integrated within the Tellervo software itself, it means that we can access the data from the database very easily. So for instance, we can click on any of these pins, and these will bring up the main information for these sites. And using the buttons on here, we can jump directly into the metadatabase and see the metadata for these sites, and we can also search for any series that are associated with this site. So that'll bring up any raw measurement data we have, any actual measurement series we have for the site, and also any chronologies that we have within the database for that site. So it's a really good way of exploring your data set spatially. So in addition to the remote map data, we can also bring in local map data as well. So if you've got map data stored on your hard disk, we can bring that on as well. So basically we've got a basic map viewer for showing any sort of map data you have on your system. So to do that, we use the Add Layer button, and it gives us a number of options. So for instance, we can bring in ESRI shapefiles. So for instance, I have some data here. We can bring in the Byzantine coastline for this area. And also bring in rivers from the area, which have, as you can imagine, are quite important for the sedimentary regime for the site we're working on here at Yeni Kappa. And let's bring on one more data file. So another way we found this has been extremely useful is for we have the excavators grid plan from the site that we've been working on. So this enables us to keep helps with the communication with the excavators from this site. So it helps us to understand exactly where our stuff is coming from. So another tool we have here is a snapshot creator. So we can use this to take an image from this particular map. So if you want to use the map view in publications, you can do that by simply clicking on this button and saving an image file. That's why having the control on the tools is very useful. So this image creator takes a snapshot of exactly what you see on the screen here. So it's quite handy to be able to turn off the controls, but also you may want to turn on things like the scale bar for maps like that. So so this is the main, as I say, the main site map viewer. The other way of accessing the map data within the system, if we close out of that, is within the data editor itself. So if I was to open up a file from our system, so whenever you have map data location data associated with your samples, you'll notice that you get a third tab on the main data editing screen containing a map. So as you can see, this is fairly similar to the main mapping screen, but it just gives you a quick and easy way of visualizing where your sample is from. So the other neat thing with this is when you zoom into your site, we'll also bring in the locations of any other samples within that same site. So for instance, here we can see a selection of the trees that were collected alongside the current sample. So this is very handy for understanding relationships between your samples. Okay, so one thing I should also mention is the requirements for this mapping. So the 3D sort of processing requirements for this these map facilities means that you require a relatively recent graphics card within your computer. So for the last sort of 5 or 6 years, pretty much any graphics card that came with your computers is capable of doing this. So it's not a great deal, it's not a big requirement. But if you do have an older machine, you may find that when you try and load these maps, you get an error message saying you don't have the capabilities. The other thing to mention is that you also require proper drivers installed for your graphics card. So particularly on people using Windows, sometimes the standard graphics drivers that comes with your computer are the sort of generic ones that come with Windows, and these generally aren't good enough to run this. So you may find that you need to update your graphics drivers. So there are instructions on how to do this within the documentation. So if you have problems, take a look at that. And of course, if you have any problems, just let me know, and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay, thanks very much.